Public employees make their case against major changes to the New Hampshire retirement system, coming up in the Cloakroom. Hi, I'm Brad Bosse, and welcome back into the Cloakroom, the video magazine from the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. Facing a $4 billion unfunded liability, the New Hampshire retirement system is the focus of major reforms in the New Hampshire legislature. The House Special Committee on Retirement Reform is looking at transferring the system from the traditional pension plan based on defined benefits for employees to a defined contribution plan, much more like the 401k plans and IRAs offered in the private sector. New Hampshire public employees asked to brief the committee on their concerns, bringing in a panel of national experts who say defined contribution plans are too uncertain and too expensive.
My organization recently did a survey of 500 small business owners throughout the country. It was a national survey, and we defined small business owners as those who employ less than 50 employees. And one of the things that we found out from the survey was, and I think it's somewhat intuitive, that businesses on Main Street is completely different than the mindset of Wall Street. That these small business owners really do care about their employees. And what they stated was that they are highly concerned about the retirement security of their employees. And I think that intuitively makes sense. I mean, unlike a large corporation, you know, small business owners, they work with their employees on a day-to-day basis. They know them by name. They're not numbers. They may even know their families. And, you know, small business owners do take their responsibility to their employees very seriously. And they cited that currently the retirement options that they can afford or what the regulations allow is just not enough. You know, they feel that 401ks, while it's helpful, the small business owners recognize that they need that third leg back.
In the state of Texas, Texas teachers has a state pension system that they have operated. They have a strict limit on the dollar amount that the employer puts into the plan of 6%. The employees put a contribution in as well. That plan has been a well-funded plan that's delivered the benefits promised in that plan, and is one of the plans we studied in our thing. You can find ways of getting there without going to the defined contribution now, because the defined benefit plan, again, over the long term, I will give you the study that will show the last 10 years of Texas financially. They're a little bit less than 80% funded, but it's a system where the state has said, this is our cap. It means in some years you're not going to make the full contribution to the ARC, but over the long period of time, you are going to get there and you'll smooth that out. So you can do that same type of saying, this is what we're going to do. You can do it in a defined benefit plan, and you'll still be able to provide adequate benefits and keep your liability.
We've just gone through a once in 75 years debacle. I mean, it is, you know, that any pension system is in some trouble after the worst recession in 75 years is not surprising. And the great thing is that, you know, you have these amortization periods. You don't have to pay everything back all at once. It's an ongoing concern, and you can make it up. But, you know, and so you shouldn't. We don't anticipate, you don't anticipate, and shouldn't, that you'll have another once in every 75 years debacle anytime soon. It's not out of the realm of the possible, but it's not like it. So, what is the right approach to determining the benefit? One way that many people consider fair, and I'm not going to tell you what's fair, you have your own judgment about it, is to make sure that your employees are treated comparably to people in the private sector. And that means in terms of total compensation.
If we did that, then we'd be going to find contribution.
I don't mean in terms of any particular element of pay. Because you could say that, but then you'd also have to look at the relative pay and raise the pay at the same time. If
Not New
employees,
Hampshire. If,
no,
if there were not.
right, if they're, because our institute has looked across the nation. I think we've looked at 12 states, and in every state, public employees are undercompensated on average compared to the private sector in terms of pay, and benefits make it up, and generally, even with the better benefits.
For comparable jobs.
For comparable jobs with comparable experience in education. Education is a key.
We're joined now by Josh Elliott-Traficante. He's a policy analyst with us here at the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. The public employees brought in this panel of experts. They say defined contribution is too risky and too expensive to shift the pension plan. Why do they think that it's more expensive than a defined benefit plan, which has led to this $4 billion unfunded liability?
It's really hard to say exactly, get a good apples-to-apples comparison between a DB plan and a DC plan. You do get some savings in DB plan, but with DC plan, it's sort of hard to say when you're counting cost ratios and things like that, so it's really hard to get a perfect comparison. But over the long run, DC plans are geared to the individual employees. A good example is a target date retirement fund. For example, you calculate out 65 years, or when you're going to turn 65, you go into that fund. It's balanced in such a way that it's more aggressive. As you're younger, you have more, if you have a bad year, say 2 years ago, have a bad year, you're able to make it up in the long term. As you get closer and closer to your retirement age, the fund balances itself out. So it goes from, say, a 90-10 ratio between stocks and bonds down to about a 50-50 ratio by the time you retire, and slowly goes on a glide slope down.
So when you're 55, you're no longer invested in tech stocks, you're buying T-bills.
Exactly. Not exactly to that direct proportion, but you're building a more conservative portfolio as you grow older. So the idea that somebody who's a year away from retirement all of a sudden loses 30% in their stock return and their 401k is a sign that they have a poorly balanced fund. And a lot of funds, retirement funds today, are balanced so it doesn't do that. Now, granted, the entire economy could tank, but then again, we'd have a lot more problems than just retirement funds.
They say that part of the problem, the reason we're having a pension crisis in New Hampshire and in 49 other states, is because the economy was so bad. We had 2 recessions in a decade. That any pension system would be in trouble. There's no need to change everything. We just need the economy to recover.
That is not the case. Even before the 2008 losses, we were still roughly about 60% funded. So we were still in bad shape before the recent recession, even the early recessions in the 2000s. This is not a stock return problem. This is a systemic problem. This isn't something that we're going to fix. It's not something we're just going to outgrow and say, oh, this is a temporary thing, we'll be back. This is the New Hampshire retirement system in particular has been slowly losing ground in their funding ratio since about the year 2000. Granted, poor stock return years didn't help the situation, but even if we had spectacular returns, there were years we had 16% returns and we were still losing ground. It's not just a stock problem, it's a systemic problem.
In New Hampshire, we've had great years in the stock market, and that's led the legislature to be extra generous in the retirement system and start giving out those extra returns above the average. Well, if you take away the above average years, all you're left with is...
There's nothing to fill in the below average years. That's something that obviously needs to change. It already has changed. They've sort of taken a hands-off approach to that. We've gotten rid of the special accounts where all of that money would go into to, say, fund COLAs, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea of a DB system is that when you set an assumed rate of return, you get anything over that, that helps flatten out the rate of return during the bad year. So say some years you get 16, 17%. This past year we got 23%, again, an exceptional year. However, you're also, for every year you have a 23% return, you're also going to have years where you lose 20%. So in theory, at the end, it should balance out to that figure. Again, in the past, they siphoned off those funds, which is in part the reason we're in the problem that we are.
Isn't this all about risk? That employees want taxpayers to bear the risk of bad years, and taxpayers want employees to bear the risk of bad years?
Exactly. I'm sure people out there have their own 401ks and probably saw a pretty decent hit in 2008. They didn't expect the taxpayers to come and fill that deficit for them. Whereas with the DB plan, it's expected the taxpayers have to pick up that money that's lost.
All right, thank you, Dr. Elliott-Traficante.
You're welcome.
Retirement system, still a $4 billion problem. We'll be tracking it right here in the Cloakroom.